Alien Girl returned the human's map after the storm, but the route she drew held quiet meaning. Hello everyone. Before we begin today's story, I have a small favor to ask. Please hit subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you never miss our channel's new videos. It's quick, free, and the best way to support us in bringing you more dramatic stories. Your support means the world to us. Where are you watching from? Drop your city or country in the comments below. Thank you very much. Now, let's get back to the story. David Miller adjusted the straps of his backpack, pulling the thick fabric tighter against the biting wind. The storm had passed, but its icy remnants still whipped across the barren landscape, cutting through the layers of clothing he wore. He took a deep breath, the frigid air stinging his lungs, and glanced at the map in his hands. His destination was still far, but the path was clearer now that the snowstorm had subsided. The world around him was eerily silent, save for the crunch of his boots in the snow. As he trudged through the white expanse, his thoughts lingered on the events of the last few hours. He had found her, an alien, stranded in the middle of the storm. At first, he'd thought her a mirage, the desperation in her eyes a figment of his exhaustion. But there she was, tall, with emerald green skin, her features sharp and regal, unlike anything he had ever seen. Her alien eyes, a bright shade of violet, had met his with a mixture of fear and gratitude when he offered her shelter. She hadn't spoken much, just silently accepting his help. As he'd led her into the small cave he'd found to take refuge from the storm, she had barely moved, clearly exhausted and chilled to the bone. David had offered her his last bit of food, his last drop of water, and in return, she'd drawn him a map on a piece of torn cloth, a route that seemed to lead back to her ship, or at least somewhere he could find more supplies. The gesture felt strange. He didn't know why she had chosen to help him, a complete stranger, but something about it seemed important. A bond had formed, subtle but undeniable, between the two. She had no name to give, but her eyes spoke volumes, grateful yet distant, calm but full of secrets. As the storm finally cleared, she had offered him the map she had drawn for him, along with a quiet smile. David hadn't expected anything in return. He didn't know what to make of the map. It was just a simple drawing of a route, the lines scratched hastily across the cloth, but the look in her eyes told him there was more to it. She had gone to great lengths to draw it, taking the time to show him the safest path through the treacherous terrain. But why? What was it about this alien that made her help him? David knew nothing of her, not even her name. But he couldn't shake the feeling that their paths had crossed for a reason. There was a story hidden behind the map, a story that he couldn't yet understand but felt he needed to. With the map in his hands, David set his sights on the horizon, wondering what lay ahead and whether the quiet meaning of the route would reveal itself as he ventured further into the unknown. With each step, he felt the weight of the map in his pocket, and he knew, somehow, that this was just the beginning of a journey that would change both of their lives forever. The morning after the storm, the world outside was still and cold. The sky was a pale gray, a soft light filtering through the clouds, casting an eerie glow across the snowy landscape. David stood at the entrance of the small cave, staring out at the expanse before him. The wind had died down, but the aftermath of the storm lingered in the thick blanket of snow covering the ground. He glanced down at the map once more, its edges tattered from his hurried handling. The route Zara had drawn for him was simple, yet something about it felt important. He wasn't sure what he was expecting to find, but a part of him knew he had to follow it. There was no turning back now. He took a deep breath, adjusted his pack, and set off toward the path indicated on the map. Zara had watched him silently as he prepared to leave, her violet eyes filled with a quiet understanding. She hadn't said much since the storm had passed, but there had been something in the way she looked at him that spoke volumes. She had helped him, despite the odds, despite the distance between their worlds, despite everything. David shook off the thought and focused on the task ahead. The map led him through the snow-covered plains, toward a distant mountain range. It was the same direction Zara had pointed to when she first gave him the map. The terrain was treacherous, with deep snowdrifts and hidden ice patches, but David pressed on, his boots crunching through the fresh snow. Hours passed, and the landscape grew more and more desolate. The cold seemed to seep into his bones, but he pushed forward, fueled by the memory of Zara's quiet smile and the mystery of the route she had drawn. As he made his way deeper into the wilderness, he couldn't shake the feeling that Zara was somehow watching him, guiding him from a distance. He had no way of knowing if her intentions were truly kind, but the map, the route, everything about it felt like a puzzle he had to solve. It wasn't just a path through the snow, it was something more. A story, perhaps, or a message. Something that would unlock the mystery of the connection between him and this strange alien girl. His thoughts were interrupted as he reached the base of the mountain range. The jagged peaks rose up before him, their snow-covered tops shrouded in mist. He paused for a moment to take in the sight, then looked down at the map again. The route she had drawn seemed to lead straight into the heart of the mountains. David wasn't sure what he was expecting to find, but he felt an undeniable pull to follow the path. He took the first step onto the mountain trail, feeling the cold wind whip against his face. With each step, the sense of uncertainty grew. But there was something else as well, something deeper. The weight of the map in his pocket felt heavier now, like it was calling him forward, urging him to continue. He didn't know what lay ahead, but he couldn't stop now, not when he was this close. The path twisted and turned as he climbed higher into the mountains, the air growing thinner and colder. The terrain was rough, and the snow made every step a challenge. Yet, he pushed on, his mind racing with questions he couldn't answer. What was Zara's story? Why had she helped him? And why did her map feel so important? As he climbed, the sun began to dip below the horizon, casting long shadows across the snow. David knew he would have to make camp soon, but the pull of the map was too strong to ignore. He pressed forward, the cold biting at his skin, his thoughts consumed by the journey and the girl who had set him on this path. Something told him that this was only the beginning, that whatever lay ahead would change everything. David had been climbing for hours, the trail narrowing and becoming steeper with each step. The sun had set, leaving the mountains cloaked in an eerie twilight. The chill in the air had settled deep into his bones, but he barely noticed it. His focus was entirely on the map Zara had given him, the lines she had drawn now more meaningful than ever. The cold seemed to vanish with each step he took, replaced by a growing sense of purpose. He knew he had to continue. There was something important waiting at the end of this journey. As he climbed higher, the landscape began to change. The jagged rocks that had once seemed intimidating now appeared less menacing. The silence of the mountain was almost soothing, the only sound being the crunch of snow beneath his boots. It felt as though he was stepping into a different world, one that was both alien and familiar. He looked around, the snow-covered peaks standing tall against the darkening sky, and for a moment, he thought he saw something, a flicker of movement in the distance. It was brief, almost like a trick of the light, but it was enough to make him pause. His heart skipped a beat, but he quickly dismissed it. There was no time to waste. The map had led him this far, and he had to trust that it would guide him to what he needed. Another hour passed, and David found himself at the base of a large cliff. The terrain was more difficult here, the snow deeper, and the rocks slick with ice. He was tired, but the path was clear, he just needed to keep going. The map indicated a route up the cliff, a path that zigzagged its way to the top. David studied it carefully, noting the marks Zara had left behind. They were simple, but there was something precise about the way she had drawn them. It wasn't just a map, it was a message, a guide meant for him. With renewed determination, David began the climb. The ice was treacherous, but he moved carefully, his hands gripping the jagged rocks as he pulled himself upward. Each step took effort, but his mind was clear. He wasn't just climbing a mountain. He was following a path that had been laid out for him by someone who understood the journey. He couldn't explain it, but something told him that Zara had known he would be here. She had drawn this map for him, and somehow, it felt as though she had been guiding him all along. As he reached the top, the wind picked up, howling through the rocks and sending a chill down his spine. He had reached the summit, but the view was obscured by the heavy fog that had rolled in. David stepped forward, the fog swirling around him, and for the first time, he felt a sense of unease. He had expected something to be here, a sign, a marker, anything that would confirm he had reached his destination. But there was nothing. He stood there for a moment, the cold wind biting at his face, and just as he was about to turn back, something caught his eye. A small, glowing object half buried in the snow. He knelt down to examine it, brushing the snow aside with his gloved hands. It was a device, sleek and alien, its surface glowing faintly with a soft blue light. It looked out of place here, and David's heart raced as he realized what it might mean. This was what Zara had been guiding him to. He picked it up carefully, feeling its warmth against the cold of the mountain. The device seemed to hum softly in his hands, as if responding to his touch. He looked around, feeling a mix of excitement and confusion. What was this device? And how had Zara known about it? His questions were interrupted by the sound of footsteps behind him. David turned quickly, his heart pounding in his chest, but there was no one there. The fog had thickened, and the mountain was once again silent. But David knew that he wasn't alone. He could feel it. Something was watching him, and for the first time in a long while, he wasn't sure if it was a friend or an enemy. David's fingers gripped the alien device tightly, the soft blue glow pulsing against his gloved hand. It hummed lightly, almost as if it was alive, and for a brief moment, he felt a strange connection to it. The fog swirled around him, thickening, making it harder to see, but the light from the device cut through the haze like a beacon. He stood up, holding the object in front of him, the weight of it grounding him to the moment. There was something undeniably important about this, something that felt more than coincidence. This device, this place, it all felt like a puzzle piece falling into place. But the question remained, what was he supposed to do with it? David glanced around the mountain summit, but the fog only thickened, obscuring everything beyond a few feet. It was as if the world had suddenly shrunk, leaving him in this one isolated spot, alone with only the device and the cold. He took a step forward, the crunch of his boots in the snow the only sound, and paused, feeling a sudden chill down his spine. The footsteps from earlier echoed again, but this time, they seemed clearer, closer. He spun around, eyes wide, but still no one appeared. His heart raced, adrenaline spiking. Was it Zara? Was she close by, waiting for him to make the next move? Or was it something else entirely? The wind howled through the mountain pass, carrying with it a strange whisper that sounded almost like a voice, but it was lost in the noise of the storm. David's grip on the device tightened as he stood there, staring into the fog. A shiver ran down his spine, but not from the cold. There was something more to this place, something waiting to be discovered. He had come all this way, followed the map, trusted Zara's cryptic guide, and now, with the device in his hand, he knew he was at the threshold of something much larger than he could have ever imagined. As the moments passed, the whispering wind seemed to shift direction, and with it, the air around David began to feel warmer. The fog started to recede slowly, lifting just enough for him to make out a faint shape in the distance. A structure? It was hard to tell through the mist, but there was something there. Without hesitation, David began walking toward it, his footsteps more determined now. Each step took him closer to whatever secret the mountain held. The device in his hand seemed to pulse in time with his heartbeat, and he could feel the weight of its significance. The closer he got, the clearer the shape became. It wasn't just a structure, it was a large, ancient-looking doorway, carved into the side of the mountain, covered in strange markings. His breath caught in his throat as he approached it. This was it, the destination, the answer to all his questions. He stepped forward, reaching out toward the door, his hand trembling slightly as he ran his fingers over the markings. They were familiar in a way he couldn't explain, as though they had been etched into his memory long ago. As his hand touched the surface, the device in his grip flared brightly, sending a shock of warmth through his body. For a brief moment, the markings on the door seemed to glow, reacting to the device. The door began to shift, its massive stone slabs moving slowly, revealing a passageway beyond. David's heart raced with anticipation, and he stepped forward, the fog now completely lifted, as though the mountain itself had given way to reveal its hidden truth. What lay ahead was unknown, but David knew, deep down, that this was the moment that would change everything. The device in his hand thrummed once more, as if urging him forward. He took a deep breath, stepping into the darkness beyond the door, leaving the mountains cold and the fog behind. Whatever came next, he was ready. David stepped cautiously into the dimly lit passageway, the air inside the mountain's secret doorway warmer than the icy winds outside. His footsteps echoed softly in the stone corridor, the only sound besides the rhythmic pulse of the device still clutched tightly in his hand. The walls were smooth, almost unnaturally so, as if they had been carved by a force far beyond anything human. Strange markings adorned the stone, glowing faintly in the soft light emitted by the device. It felt as though he was walking through a forgotten world, one that had been hidden away for centuries, waiting for someone to find it. As he moved deeper into the corridor, the temperature seemed to rise even further, and the air grew thick with the scent of something ancient, dust and stone, but with a hint of something else. Something alive. David's pulse quickened, and he couldn't shake the feeling that the mountain itself was watching him, guiding him forward. He didn't know what he was walking toward, but the map had led him here, and the device in his hand was urging him on. With each step, he felt closer to an answer, though the question still eluded him. The hallway narrowed as he walked, the walls closing in around him, until he found himself in a large chamber. The space was vast, stretching high above him, and at the center, a pedestal stood, bathed in the soft glow of light emanating from the device. The pedestal seemed to hum with energy, as if it were alive. David stepped closer, his eyes narrowing as he examined it. Atop the pedestal was a small, crystalline object, its surface gleaming with a strange iridescence. He had no idea what it was, but he knew it was the key to everything. The device in his hand pulsed again, more urgently this time, and as he reached out to touch the crystal, a wave of energy surged through him, sending a jolt of warmth through his body. The walls around him seemed to ripple, the air vibrating with an unseen force. He stepped back, startled by the intensity of the sensation, but the device in his hand flared brighter, as if it were responding to the crystal. Slowly, cautiously, David reached out again, his fingers brushing the surface of the crystal. The moment his skin made contact, a rush of images flooded his mind. Visions of a world far away, a civilization that had long since disappeared, leaving behind only these remnants. He saw flashes of Zara, her eyes full of purpose and pain, guiding him toward this moment. The images shifted, showing him a vast city, its towering structures crumbling into dust. But at the heart of it all was the device, and the crystal, an ancient power, the source of everything. As quickly as it had come, the vision faded, leaving David breathless and disoriented. He stumbled back, his mind racing to process what he had just experienced. The crystal was a key, but to what? And why had Zara led him here? The device in his hand began to hum. Softly, the glow intensifying, as if urging him to do something. He looked back at the pedestal, the crystal now pulsing with energy, and realized what he had to do. He reached out again, this time with a sense of purpose. As his fingers wrapped around the crystal, the chamber around him seemed to come alive. The walls shimmered, and the ground beneath his feet trembled. He could feel the power coursing through him, through the crystal, as if the very essence of the mountain was awakening. The air was thick with the energy, and David knew this was just the beginning. Zara had brought him here for a reason. He had unlocked something ancient, something powerful, and he was about to find out exactly what it meant. The moment David's fingers made full contact with the crystal, the entire chamber seemed to awaken. The walls rippled with energy, the air thick with a strange, almost palpable hum. His mind raced as the power surged through him, but there was no pain, only a sense of deep connection, as if he were tapping into something ancient, something that had been waiting for this very moment. The glowing markings on the walls flickered like fireflies in the dark, casting eerie shadows across the chamber. The ground beneath him trembled lightly, and David felt a growing warmth spreading from the crystal into his chest. His heart raced, not out of fear, but with the overwhelming sensation of discovery, of unlocking a long-forgotten truth. He slowly stood up, the crystal still in his grasp, and the hum from the device intensified. It was as though the entire structure around him was listening, responding to the energy coursing through the chamber. The vision from before returned, but this time, it was clearer. He could see Zara again, standing in the center of a vast city, the architecture alien and majestic, yet crumbling into ruin. She seemed to be calling out to him, her eyes pleading with him to understand. The crystal, he now realized, was more than just a key. It was a conduit, a bridge between the past and the present. But what was its purpose? What was he meant to do with it? The vision faded as quickly as it had appeared, and David was left standing in the chamber, his pulse still racing. He looked down at the crystal, its glow softening as the energy settled, and for a brief moment, everything went silent. Then, a low rumble echoed from deep within the mountain, and the ground beneath David's feet began to shift. He stumbled back, unsure of what was happening, but the tremors stopped as abruptly as they had started. David's eyes narrowed as he scanned the room, his breath fogging in the cold air. The walls were now covered in intricate symbols, all seeming to move and shift in a rhythmic pattern, like a dance of light and shadow. The path was becoming clearer now, but what did it mean? Was this part of the message Zara had left him? He could feel a connection, as if the answers were within his grasp, but just out of reach. He couldn't explain it, but the feeling that this was far from over pressed heavily on his mind. Taking a deep breath, he turned toward the newly revealed passage at the far end of the chamber. The markings on the walls seemed to guide him, pointing the way forward. The device in his hand pulsed again, its light now steady, and David knew without a doubt that he was meant to continue. He stepped forward, each footfall echoing in the stillness of the ancient mountain, his heart beating in time with the rhythm of the crystal. He didn't know what he would find at the end of this path, but one thing was certain. He was no longer alone in this journey. The map had led him here, and Zara's presence, though distant, was still with him, guiding him toward whatever lay ahead. The chamber narrowed as he moved, the walls closing in, and soon, he was standing at the entrance of another vast room. This one was different, though. The air was thick, and the room was bathed in a soft, golden light. He stepped inside, his eyes widening as he took in the sight before him. An enormous chamber, its ceiling lost in shadows, with an altar at its center. There, waiting for him, was the next piece of the puzzle. Zara's map, the crystal, and now this altar. It was all connected. The next step was clear. He reached out, feeling the hum of energy in the air, and as his fingers brushed the surface of the altar, the room seemed to come alive once more. David knew that whatever secrets this place held, he was now ready to uncover them. As David's fingers brushed the surface of the altar, a soft hum resonated through the chamber, vibrating the air around him. It was almost as though the entire room was responding to his touch, coming alive with ancient energy that had lain dormant for centuries. The golden light from the walls grew brighter, bathing the altar in a warm glow that seemed to pulse with a rhythm of its own. David hesitated for only a moment before his curiosity pushed him forward. He pressed his palm flat against the altar, the sensation of warmth flooding through him as the hum intensified. For a brief moment, everything around him seemed to disappear. The walls, the floor, even the cold air, until there was nothing but the glowing light and the soft pulse beneath his hand. Then, as quickly as it had started, the energy stilled, and the light faded back to its original state, leaving David standing in the now quiet chamber. The altar was no longer dormant, but he could feel something new, something unspoken had shifted. The device in his hand, still warm and humming softly, seemed to respond. The crystal had lost some of its intensity, but now seemed more attuned to the altar. David looked around, trying to piece together the purpose of this room and the role it played in Zara's guidance. Was this an ancient ritual site? Was this where the secrets he had been searching for would finally be revealed? The air was thick with the weight of those unanswered questions, but there was no time to waste. He could feel the pull of the altar, almost like an invitation to explore further, to find the answers that had been kept hidden. He stepped back, his eyes scanning the room for any clue that could guide him. The walls were covered with intricate symbols, similar to the ones he had seen earlier, but now they appeared to be moving, shifting in patterns that almost seemed to make sense, if only he could decipher them. He knew the map Zara had given him had led him here, but this felt different. The presence of the crystal, the energy of the altar, and the strange connection he felt. It was as though everything had been set into motion by his arrival. He reached for the crystal again, sensing that the next step would come when he connected the energy from the altar to the device. Without hesitation, he placed the crystal into a small indent on the altar's surface. As soon as he did, the chamber responded once more. The golden light flared, and the symbols on the walls began to glow more intensely, forming a coherent pattern. The ground beneath him trembled, as if some long-forgotten mechanism was coming to life. David's heart raced, but his instincts told him to stay calm. This was the moment he had been waiting for. The vision he had experienced before came to him again, this time more vividly. Zara appeared before him, her eyes filled with sorrow and hope. Her face was clearer now, and though she was far away, he could sense her presence, guiding him through this trial. Her voice echoed in his mind, soft but clear. "You have found it, David. The key to understanding what has been lost. Now, it is your turn to decide." The words reverberated through his thoughts, and the vision shifted. He saw the ruins of the city again, its towering structures crumbling. But this time, there was something else, an energy rising from the center, a power that was both ancient and familiar. The power surged, filling the room as the altar began to hum once more, this time with a sound that was almost a voice, calling him forward. David stepped back, his gaze fixed on the glowing patterns on the walls. The chamber was alive now, and he knew that the answers were within his reach. Whatever Zara had hoped he would find, whatever he was meant to unlock, was here. The choice, the next step, was his to take. David stood still, the glowing patterns on the walls pulsating like a heartbeat. The air was thick with the sense of something ancient, something powerful, but there was also a sense of urgency building inside him. Zara's voice, though distant, seemed to echo in his mind, urging him to make the next move. "It is your turn to decide," she had said, her words lingering, their meaning still unclear. He had been searching for answers, for something that would make sense of all the strange events that had led him here, but now he realized that the answers would come only when he chose to act. The chamber around him felt alive, the walls pressing in, and the soft hum of the altar continued, guiding him, pulling him toward whatever lay ahead. David knew that this was a pivotal moment in his journey. The choices he made now would determine the outcome. He looked down at the crystal still glowing in his hand, the light now steady, like a beacon. It was as if the crystal was waiting for him, urging him to do something. He stepped forward, feeling the weight of the moment. The room seemed to shift, the glowing patterns on the walls guiding him toward the center of the chamber where the altar stood. He approached it, the air growing warmer with each step, the hum of energy growing stronger. He placed the crystal carefully into the indent on the altar, and as soon as he did, the chamber came alive once again. The ground beneath his feet trembled as a burst of light shot from the crystal, engulfing the room in a blinding glow. For a moment, David couldn't see anything, his vision overwhelmed by the light. But then, as the glow faded, he found himself standing in a new place. The walls of the chamber were gone, replaced by a vast, open sky. The ground beneath him was solid, but it was unlike anything he had ever seen, smooth, metallic, and glowing with the same energy as the crystal. He was no longer inside the mountain. He was standing on what appeared to be a massive platform, floating in the middle of a vast, empty expanse. It was like nothing David had ever imagined. The air here was still, yet filled with an energy that hummed in his very bones. The sky above was dark, but filled with distant stars and nebulae that shimmered with colors David could not name. As he looked around, he realized that he was not alone. Figures appeared from the darkness, moving gracefully through the air, their forms illuminated by the soft glow of the platform. They were humanoid but alien, with features that were both beautiful and unsettling. Their skin shimmered with iridescent colors, and their eyes were a deep, luminous violet. They moved toward David, their presence both commanding and peaceful. He felt no fear, only an overwhelming sense of awe. One of them, a female figure with silver hair and violet eyes, stepped forward. Her gaze met his, and for a moment, he felt as though she were looking straight through him, as if she could see into his very soul. "You have come," she said, her voice melodic, yet filled with an authority that made David feel small in comparison. "We have waited for you." David's heart raced, his mind reeling with questions. Who were these beings? What did they want from him? And how had he ended up here, standing on a floating platform in a world beyond his understanding? The female figure reached out a hand, and without thinking, David stepped forward, placing his hand in hers. The moment their hands touched, a flood of memories rushed into David's mind. Visions of a time long ago, a civilization that had risen and fallen, leaving behind only these fragments of their existence. The alien beings were part of this history, but their role was shrouded in mystery. The images faded as quickly as they had come, leaving David standing in silence, his heart racing with the weight of what he had just experienced. The female figure spoke again, her voice softer this time. "You are the one who will restore balance," she said. "You hold the key to what was lost. You must decide whether to use it." David felt the weight of her words sink in, the realization dawning on him. This was why he had been brought here. The device, the crystal, Zara's guidance, it was all leading him to this moment. The decision was his. The future, it seemed, was in his hands. David stood frozen, the weight of the female figure's words settling heavily upon him. He had been chosen for something greater than himself, something far beyond his understanding. His thoughts raced, grappling with the magnitude of the decision he was being asked to make. Restore balance? He could feel the gravity of the responsibility, the power that rested in his hands. But how could he possibly know what to do with it? The alien beings around him watched, their violet eyes reflecting a deep knowing, as if they understood the struggle he was facing. "What do you mean by balance?" David asked, his voice barely a whisper, his eyes still locked on the figure before him. The female's expression softened, and she stepped closer, her presence filling the space. "In the time before, our people lived in harmony with the forces of the universe, understanding the balance between creation and destruction, light and dark," she explained, her voice resonating with a timeless wisdom. "But when the imbalance grew too great, we were forced to withdraw, to hide ourselves away, waiting for the one who would restore what was lost." David's heart raced. "And you think that's me?" he asked, his voice shaky but determined. "You are the one who has come to us," she said simply, her gaze unwavering. "The one chosen to decide the fate of what remains. The crystal you hold contains the knowledge of our civilization, the power to bring us back or to destroy us. The decision is yours." The weight of her words hung in the air, thick with the promise of a future yet to be shaped. David looked down at the crystal in his hand, its soft glow pulsing steadily, almost like a heartbeat. He had come so far, followed the map, placed his trust in Zara's guidance, and now he was standing on the precipice of something enormous. But how could he know what to choose? How could he, a mere human, make a decision that would affect the fate of an entire civilization? "How do I know what the right choice is?" David asked, his voice full of uncertainty. The female figure's expression softened further, and for a moment, she seemed almost human. "The right choice," she said gently, "is not always the easiest. It is the one that feels true to your heart. We have waited for someone like you, someone who can see beyond the surface, someone who will make the decision for the greater good." David took a deep breath, his mind swirling with the possibilities. He thought of Zara, her face, her eyes, the way she had silently guided him to this moment. She had known this would be his choice, and yet, she had not been there to help him make it. He felt a pang of longing, wishing she were here beside him, but he knew now that this was his journey, his decision to make. He closed his eyes, feeling the warmth of the crystal in his hand, and slowly, a sense of clarity washed over him. It wasn't about power. It wasn't about control. It was about preserving what had been lost, about finding a way to restore balance and harmony, not just for these alien beings, but for all of humanity. Opening his eyes, David stepped forward, holding the crystal high. "I choose to restore what was lost," he said, his voice steady now, filled with purpose. The chamber around him seemed to respond, the air vibrating with energy as the golden light from the walls intensified, bathing him in its glow. The figures around him began to move, their forms shifting as if acknowledging his decision. The female figure gave him a slow, approving nod, her eyes filled with something resembling gratitude. "Then the path has been set," she said, her voice filled with finality. "You have made the right choice, David Miller." As the words echoed in the chamber, the ground beneath him began to tremble again, this time more gently, as though the entire structure was awakening from a long slumber. The crystal pulsed one final time before dimming, its energy now flowing into the very heart of the mountain. David stood tall, his heart calm, knowing that his decision had been made. The balance had been restored, and with it, the future of this ancient civilization and perhaps his own. Zara's presence lingered in his mind, and he felt certain that wherever she was watching, waiting, proud of the choice he had made. With a deep breath, he turned to face the vast, open expanse before him, knowing that the journey was far from over. But for the first time, he felt ready for whatever came next.